I've done two specials in the past talking about god-awful indie games on Steam, which is typically where you can reliably find some of the worst games in all creation. Anybody with access to any programming software can make a game and sell it on Steam, which is why a lot of the non-professional games on the service are buggy as hell, horrendously designed, half-heartedly chasing fads, or otherwise just plain crap. Seriously, I think this scene from the movie Dread perfectly describes Steam.
12 serious crimes reported every minute, 17,000 per day. We can respond to around 6%.
God, Dread is a great movie. Anyway, I want to try a little something different going forward. This is going to be my last Steam indie special before I spin off these videos into their own little series where I'll cover one indie game at a time whenever I have a little time to kill. I'm going to call this series The Dark Side of Steam, but you can't just leave two entries in a series out there. It needs to be a trilogy. So let's take one more look into the bizarre world of indie developers. Before we get started, one of my viewers asked if I could feature his game, Dollar Dungeon 2 Murder in Tutorheim. It's currently on itch.io, but he's trying to get it through Steam Greenlight, so it still counts! You play as a detective who's summoned to a small town to investigate a murder, and the game is so ridiculously straightforward, I'm having trouble describing it. There's nothing in the town to interact with, barring one piece of scenery you need to check for the true ending. You can't go in any of the buildings. The entire game world is smaller than a town in a Pokemon game, an early Pokemon game. There's just nothing here. All there is to do is walk around talking to the 6 people that inhabit this town, and there's not even anything to that. There's 1 to 3 questions you can ask each person. They each have one answer to each question that never changes. There's no dialogue trees of any kind, and the dialogue is so flat that none of the characters have a personality to speak of. Half the characters don't even have names. There's one guy who offers to tell you everything there is to know about the town. His name in the list of suspects, I shit you not, is Advice Guy. Pretty much everybody you talk to says the same thing. The murder victim was flirting with 2 different guys who happen to be the only 2 people in town who can use the murder weapon. So it's super obvious right off the bat that there's only 2 real suspects, and there isn't a single clue in the game that implicates any of the other characters. There's not even really a smoking gun. The only way I knew I had reached the end of the game was I talked to everybody in town over and over and no new dialogue options open. It's like the game just cuts off and says, okay, pick a suspect, and if you didn't find the literally 1 clue in the entire game, then the game asks during the credits, is that the real ending? The game ends in less than 10 minutes, and I hate to break it to you, dude, people on Steam are accustomed to getting more than 10 minutes of just talking to people for $1. Also, I'm going to tell you a little secret. Everybody on Steam knows what RPG Maker is, and everybody knows what the default art assets for it look like. Using one of the most simple game makers on the planet and not even throwing in any of your own art is not even going to get through Steam Greenlight, ever. I'll tell you another secret. Broad is not spelled B-R-A-W-D. Run your text through spell check. I hate to be mean to someone who asks me nicely to cover their game, but I'm sorry, this isn't good enough to get on Steam. It's not even close. It's the most shallow mystery story I've ever seen. The game has no depth, there's barely any story to speak of, and there's just nothing to do. Making these games for fun on Newgrounds or itch.io, sure, knock yourself out. But Steam is where the big boys play. You need to step up your game by several levels before trying to get on Steam. That in mind, let's move on to some other games that also should not be on Steam. Let's look at Echelon next, another game sent to me by my good pal Godzilla Rodan. It's a flying game. I think. Where's the damn game? Yeah, if you go into the reviews for this game, nobody has been able to get this game to run straight off the bat. You have to go into the game's files, find its run application, and run that in compatibility mode to get the game to launch. Okay, that's new. The only option on the main menu is exit. There's no way to start the game. What? What? Well, that was a short review. The reviews on this game's store page insist that it is, in fact, possible to get the game to work, but I have no idea how. I can't summon a start game button out of my ass. This is a re-release of an old PC game, so you'd probably have better luck just buying a physical copy of the old game and getting that to work instead. How does one even fail this badly? Okay, Rodan, I'm picking up my own games for the rest of this special. Let's see if we can find something that actually runs. Let's try Labyrinth Simulator. Ah! God! If the most obnoxious music I've ever heard is any indication, the game in fact does launch. Look, the opening screen has random images of Sanic, a dog, a pot leaf, and some other memes I don't recognize because I'm not a tool. And this is what the game's opening screen used to look like. Yeah, I'm not reading that. The game has 3 game modes: Classic, Illuminati, didn't even spell it right, and Slender. The classic mode, you're in a maze and you have to walk to the exit.
Wait.
So you walk, and you walk, and you walk. My God, I am so bored. And I just know some wise ass is getting ready to type, what did you expect from a game called Labyrinth Simulator? Yeah, I knew this was gonna suck balls. Doesn't change the fact that it does, in fact, suck balls. The maze has nothing inside it. You're just walking down endless, identical, featureless hallways. My only source of entertainment is looking at the bars of texture pop in ahead of me on the walls. Oh, thank God, I found the exit. I need to find a key! Shit! Eventually, I find the damn key and take it to the end. And am greeted with more memes. Okay, first, what the hell is MLG? And don't answer, because nobody cares. Second, PewDiePie? Really? Were you trying to look pathetic, desperate, and pandering, or does it just come natural to you? The Illuminati mode is the same, except instead of a key, you're finding a bomb to take to the Illuminati headquarters, both of which were clearly drawn in 5 minutes with MS Paint. You know, this is what I draw in MS Paint. And I'm not selling this for money. It's called dignity. Find some. And Slender mode, you're tracking down 8 pages while monsters that don't actually harm you jump out at extremely telegraphed times. Because, I don't know, Slender is a thing that exists. Fascinating how the walls just randomly light up and go dark because the dev couldn't make a flashlight. Every game mode has only one map. It's exactly the same every time that you play it. The dev had one job: throw some walls down on a flat piece of land, and he couldn't be bothered to do that more than 3 times. Maybe he only made 3 levels because his level editor sucks shit. The game has a built-in level editor so that you can make your own mazes, like the dev wants you to just make the game for him, but the only way to build a maze is to painstakingly drag and drop one tiny wall fragment at a time to where it takes forever just to build one simple map. The level editor lets you go bananas with the terrain to make some epic 3D mazes, but you can't share mazes online. You can only play someone's map if you're in an online match with them, and nobody's playing online. Probably because this should never have been made into a video game. This is a thought process that's becoming more and more common among hacks. Take a game that should never see the light of day, slap an image of a Doge or Gabe Newell in it, and wait for the 4chan addicts that piss themselves laughing every time they see a troll face to lap it up. You may sell a few copies to obnoxious kids trying to be cool by eating up every meme they see doing this, but expecting actual people to buy your game because you found a picture of something popular on Google, you look pathetic. You know your game sucks, you're content to leech off something popular rather than make it better, and you look pathetic. Moving on to something that I can actually play, let's check in with our old pals at Digital Homicide. This is Galactic Hitman, one of the games they published under a fake studio name. There are 6 bases full of aliens, and you need to go kill them all. That's the story. As soon as you walk through the front door, you get dogpiled by 6 different enemies firing bright neon lasers into your retinas. The enemies stand in narrow hallways with nowhere to strafe. They're perfectly accurate, and they open fire on you the instant you see them, so there's no way to avoid getting killed constantly. Luckily, enemies stay dead when you're resurrected, so you could just very tediously Leroy Jenkins through the game one dead bad guy at a time, or you could abuse one of the most epic fail glitches I've ever seen. If you crouch, the enemies can't hit you. I am not joking. None of the enemies can hit me, aside from a rare glancing shot. Less noteworthy bugs include enemies shooting through walls, enemies not shooting period, and the healing machines work maybe half the time. All kind of minor points next to I can slaughter every enemy in the game with no resistance. This doesn't even require effort. There are only 2 enemy models across the entire game, and none of the enemies have any AI. None of the enemies can move, they just stand in place and point straight at you. All of the enemies are armed with basic guns, and there's nothing even vaguely resembling a boss. It's just blowing up the 2 same stationary bad guys over and over again. Every single hallway looks the same, and with how many times I've seen the exact same room and the exact same enemies in the exact same placements, I'm pretty sure every level is just the previous level directly copied with a few new hallways tacked on. How else do you explain this? Oh, sorry, this hallway is still under construction. Come back next level. There's no ammo to pick up. Kind of funny considering Digital Homicide's difficulties with ammo in the past. So instead, your gun has a 10,000 round magazine. The gun has a set firing rate and doesn't fire every time you click the mouse, but the gun bounces like it thinks it's firing every time you click. And it took me a while to figure out you have other weapons because you're given no indication as such. You can switch to a machine gun, grenades that take 3 shots to kill enemies but are worth using to see the boxes go apeshit, and a knife. Why? Both of the guns have 10,000 rounds in them. How terrible of a shot do you think I am that I would ever need a knife? Screw it, I'm just curious to see if the knife even works. Stabbed in the leg, and the guy still explodes. Outstanding. The game is boring as hell. Once you figure out the exploit, there's basically no gameplay. It's just wandering through the same 2 hallways, shooting the same 2 stationary people with the same 2 bland guns, and there's no music and 0 chance of dying, and it's over in less than an hour. The lack of effort of any kind just screams out of every store-bought pixel. It doesn't even have the so bad it's funny appeal of their other games. It's just garbage. Game just cuts off, too. There's no ending, no final boss, no conclusion. Just, congratulations! Do you want to play again? No! Next up, let's try 3D Paraglider. The game's got about 10 different locations. You pick one, you press C, and you start flying. Yep, this is flying. What happened to my right hand? Look how fun this is. The game sort of has a tutorial. When you're flying, you can turn left and right, speed up and slow down, and the physics feels a lot like a real paraglider. Turning and speeding up makes you fall faster, and slowing down helps you maintain altitude. The physics and flight mechanics feel fairly accurate and finished. The problem is that absolutely nothing else is finished! I'm passing right through the building! The entire city doesn't actually exist! Whoa. This has got to be the biggest mind trip I've seen since air control. I mean, Jesus Christ! Most of the time when you land, you just immediately die and get kicked out of the level. It's supposed to be like you crash and die if you have a rough landing, but it feels like 95% of the time when I hit the ground, I die regardless of how I landed. And you only gain altitude if you're sitting in a thermal. I don't know what that is, but you view them by holding Q, not pressing holding Q, which is awkward. So frequently when I take off, I just die immediately because there's nothing to lift me up. The game's frame rate is all over the map. There's a level that's just plain empty hills that runs at a decent frame rate, but any level with a city or trees to render, the frame rate barely stays above single digits. Speaking of cities, what is going on down there? The city's going apeshit. Textures just popping in and out constantly like the game is struggling to decide what to render. And it doesn't just happen to the buildings, it also happens with the altimeter next to you, which shouldn't have texture popping to begin with. The ground is just a screenshot from Google Maps glued over the ground texture. This guy doesn't have any eyes, and he's in every level. Why is this guy with a snowboard so tiny? And then there's that. Falling through the floor wasn't even the weirdest glitch I ran into. One time I was sitting in a thermal and I started fiddling with the camera angles. Apparently you can switch between different seats. I don't know what difference it makes. And all of a sudden I noticed the game world has gone kinda screwy. No idea how the hell this happened, but I somehow rose outside the roof of the game world. But my biggest complaint with the game is that it's hard to figure out what you're actually supposed to do. There's a guy who asks you for medicine, another guy who asks you for lunch, and I couldn't figure out how to actually do either of those things. It's not like there's a store or a hospital I can go to. Even if I found one, I could probably just phase through the front door. Am I supposed to find a gnarled, raggedy sandwich somewhere on the ground to stuff into his face? And if so, this level is huge. Where is it? The only other objectives in the game are some sets of rings to fly through and X's to drop bombs onto, which often glitch so the rings and the X's disappear. And the controls may be accurate to real life, but it's hard to turn without plummeting towards the ground. The controls are not built for either of these maneuvering activities. What it all comes down to is there's just flat out nothing to do in the entire game. Nothing freaking works! I wouldn't describe any of the objectives as being playable, let alone being fun. I get the feeling that the game is just supposed to be a straight paragliding simulator and nothing else. The controls seem accurate, there's no music, just the whooshing of the air and the majestic, if extremely low-res view. It's a cool emulation of paragliding. Then again, I also get the feeling the dev got bored and quit halfway through development and just released what he had done anyway. The sights, sounds, and majesty of paragliding, the experience that the game is trying to emulate, through a computer screen, it's cool for about 2 minutes. With nothing to actually do in the game, I'm getting bored, and I'm getting bored fast. I don't care how cool you think paragliding is. You can't build an entire game around just wandering around a cool location. Give me something to actually play, stuff to do, objectives, gameplay mechanics, story, a world worth exploring, any actual reason to play past 5 minutes. Nope. You got nothing? Okay. Getting a refund then. Bye. One last game to cover before we sign off. I mentioned that I was going to cover this game back in my first indie special, so let's finally dive into Dive to the Titanic. Or let's try to. The game barely freaking works. The game is designed to only work with DirectX 9, which is so old the game pretty much isn't designed to work on a system past Windows 7. Throwing the game in compatibility mode just brought up a text box bitching about how Steam isn't running, even if I have Steam open in another window. After I installed 3 sets of new programs onto my computer, the game ran, but the graphics wouldn't load correctly. Nothing in the game renders except for the pitch black watery background. There's no game to play. The only way I could get the game to run was to go to the graphics settings and keep clicking apply, which would cause the graphics to fade out and then reload, and every now and then the graphics would pop back in. It's like using a defibrillator on a corpse trying to get it to jump to life for a few minutes. Okay? Clear! Dick! For whatever reason, the game ran with a lot more stability after I had run it a few times, but still, the game hasn't even started and it's already on my last nerve. Anyway, on to the actual game. You're piloting a submarine on what's kind of implied to be a black market salvage operation. I don't know what the hell the story is supposed to be. The default key bindings are ridiculously unintuitive. I'm constantly going through the game's key bindings and changing around the buttons. So naturally, once you've changed the bindings, the tutorials and button prompts that you're told to use the wrong keys. Even in the pop-up icons where all you had to do was change the frickin' text. Once you figure out where the damn buttons are, the game actually controls pretty well. The submarine moves really slowly for realism, but the sub responds quickly to everything that you do. Also, this camera view inside the sub's cockpit, there's nothing to interact with in here, it's all just for show. The controls are really basic and easy to get a hold of. The game is a decent submarine piloting simulator. The physics and controls all feel intuitive and on point. The problem is, well, everything else. The first level, you have to find the Titanic using sonar pings, which is kind of cool just for simulating an actual salvage operation. All of the other levels revolve around swimming to different areas of the Titanic and seeking out various items to photograph or salvage. Here's the problem. Your submarine is too big to fit inside the Titanic, and there's probably a dick joke in there somewhere, so instead of piloting the cool submarine that the game was ostensibly built around, you spend pretty much the entire game piloting this camera sub, which is the slowest moving goddamn vehicle across land, sea, space, or sky that has ever existed in video games. So yeah, pretty much the entire game is nothing except driving this teeth-grindingly, skin-crawlingly slow submarine from objective marker to objective marker. Any fun the game might have had as a simulator or exploration game is kneecapped by the inconceivable tedium of it taking frickin' years to traverse any small part of the ship. And it only goes downhill from there. In the second level of the game, you have to swim to 3 separate rooms and photograph 3 items. This is when I realized that the game is extremely picky about how you go about clearing objectives. You're supposed to swim to a checkpoint before you can get credit for taking the picture, but you don't actually swim through the checkpoint, as you can see here where I repeatedly slam through the checkpoint and nothing happens. You're actually supposed to swim through an invisible space on the one path to the checkpoint that the dev wants you to take. See, I swam through the window instead of taking the hall, and the game didn't like that, so it's not marking it as complete. The game also does not count you as having taken a photograph of the objective unless you photograph it from one specific angle, and you only get 6 photos per level. Pretty much the one saving grace of the game is the fact that you can save anytime you want and pick up exactly where you saved at any time, and you're going to abuse the hell out of this feature every time the game fails to register a photo, or you realize you've been going the wrong way and loading a save is way faster than backtracking. You can buy upgrades in between levels, and quite frankly, every single one of these upgrades is either useless or upgrades things that don't even remotely need upgrading. The third level, you have to park the sub at the grand staircase and then use the camera and a new claw system to pick up a plate and a goblet. The only way to get to either of these objectives is to swim through the hallways of the Titanic, which is a goddamn maze of dead ends, collapsed rooms, and identical looking hallways. Navigate a maze. in a submarine that would lose a foot race with a one-legged turtle. It's so boring! Once you drag your way to the plate, you're then expected to backtrack through the exact path you took to get here, and I got so damn lost trying to figure out the way that I came that I ended up just diving out a window. At which point the game got pissy and the objective marker for the goblet disappeared, leaving me completely lost as to where in this bossy hellhole I was supposed to go. Piece of shit! And the fourth level is more of the same. The game gives you an objective marker, and you swim through endless, identical rooms, bumping into constant dead ends until you find it. Then you return to the grand staircase without an objective marker to provide any remote guidance, and then you do it again.
And if we're lucky, we might find the goblet.
Where the hell am I going? Screw it. I'm just going to swim out the window. I don't care if the game punishes me for it. See, that's another thing. You just don't feel like you're actually exploring the Titanic. Even setting aside the fact that the game basically entails you going on one straight path from objective to objective, the interior of the ship is just barren. All of the upper levels are just featureless hallways with empty and featureless rooms shutting off them. There's not even an attempt to recreate the cabins of the Titanic or what they look like now. They're just empty rectangles. And the lower levels are, again, just featureless walls that you have no idea what they used to be. It doesn't feel like you're exploring the Titanic. It feels like you're exploring a bunch of empty, anonymous rooms that are allegedly laid out in a Titanic-like shape. So the novelty that the game is sold on is just non-existent. One of the developers voices your mission control guy, Atlas, and this guy is majorly annoying. The guy's line deliveries are so flat, there's only about 2 lines in the whole game he puts any actual feeling into, and when your sub crashes at the end of the game, his voice sounds himself excited when it's supposed to be panicked and frightened.
Your batteries don't look that good either. Unfortunately, there's more. I'm afraid I can't help you. You have to free yourself. You get me? If you don't make it, then this is it for today. Finito. Done and dusted.
But the most annoying thing about this guy is when he's guiding you to an objective, he chimes in with instructions every 15 seconds. Literally! I timed it!
Now south. Even further. More left. Turn to the east. Further. Further to the south. Further to the east. Further to the right. Further to the right. More left. More left. Further to the right. To the right.
Do you have any idea how long it takes to get from place to place, and how many times he calls you just to say go straight, just going down one freaking hallway? It got to the point I muted my computer just to get him to shut the hell up! For Christ's sake, they can see the objective marker! I already know where to go! Shut your pie hole! And just when I thought the game couldn't get any worse, the last level happened. The last level is pretty basic. You hang a sign on the Titanic as a memorial, kind of patronizing and stupid, but whatever, and then a water current crashes you, ruptures your ship, and leaves you stuck with low oxygen and battery. You use the camera sub's claw to free your sub, escape, and swim to the surface. This level is supposed to last about 5 minutes. I fiddled with it for 45 minutes and still didn't crack it. See, once you reach the surface, your sub runs out of power and you die. But sometimes when I got to the surface, a red bar would appear. It says press enter periodically, and the bar would immediately drain and I'd die anyway. For the longest time, I thought you had to get to the surface as quickly as possible with perfect timing to make the bar appear, but eventually I figured out you're supposed to signal Atlas to get the red bar to appear, but you're supposed to signal him before he tells you to signal him or it doesn't work. After a lot of trial and error, I get the timing for this bar down and I fill the bar all the way up, and I get the game over screen anyway. This is supposed to be how you get to the ending of the game, but I've beaten it 5 times and the game keeps glitching so that I get game over instead. Whatever, I'm done. This game can go screw itself. The only reward for beating the game is an exploration mode where you can freely explore this series of completely empty rooms that's named the Titanic, with no objectives in the sub with the speed of a newborn baby. I don't even have the strength to tell you how much I don't want to do this. In conclusion, Dive to the Titanic is a decent set of controls and mechanics wasted on the most boring gameplay and bad level design imaginable. Stay away. Stay far away. There. I think that's a fitting way to cap off my trilogy of Steam indie reviews. Unless the new series takes and I end up bringing these back. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the flip side. The dark side of Steam.